Welcome to Ski Cap, Hoodie, and Shorts, Episode 32, Stories and Recipes, Brunch. Hey everybody, welcome to the Ski Cap, Hoodie, and Shorts podcast. My name is Ted Samaras and I'm your host. I want to thank you for joining me today. And today we're going to be talking about a popular food topic, and that is brunch. And the reason why we're rolling out this episode now, I know many of us are getting ready for Mother's Day, to take mom out, to whip something together, that type of thing. But realistically, brunch is a great meal to be able to have with friends, to be able to have during the holidays, or just an excuse to kind of go out, especially on a Sunday. So whenever you're listening to this episode, it's a great time of the year to think about brunch. So when I think about brunch, right, I wonder about the word first, right? You have the word brunch, and it's pretty self-explanatory, right? You're basically taking breakfast, which is where you get the bra, and you're taking lunch, which is where you get the unch, and you are shoving them together, and you are shoving breakfast and lunch together, and you are making it brunch. But it's more than just shoving breakfast and lunch together. It has a little bit to do with like the timing, right? A lot of people like to go out late morning, early afternoon for brunch. But brunch is kind of taken on, an idea of its own, or kind of like an identity of its own, right? You think about a little bit of a bigger spread. You think about, spoiling yourself a little bit. And, some words, get into the vernacular, and then you try to make other words that kind of sound like it, and it doesn't have the same kind of weight, right? So when you think brunch, right, it definitely has its own identity. When you think dinner, right, which is supposed to be lunch and dinner, you're either having a late lunch or you're having an early dinner, right? You don't really get too hung up on that. But brunch has become something special on its own, right? And again, you think about getting together maybe with friends or family. It's a nice excuse to kind of, dabble in a little bit of both worlds and kind of have some of those brunch ingredients too that maybe you only have for that type of meal. Now, when we talk about brunch, how did it get started, right? So some of it, dates the beginning of brunch back to, going to church on Sunday mornings. For those of you who go to church, and for those of you who sit in Mass, right, some of those church services on Sunday morning tend to last more than others. And so people would get together after Mass to eat, right? Some people go down to the basement or that type of thing of the church, and they do it that way. Other people you'll see, especially in the New York, New Jersey area, right? They hit the diners. And you see that's why sometimes like it's tough to get a seat or a booth at a diner at like 10, 11 o'clock in the morning on a Sunday, right? But realistically though, taking out the religious component of things, it is kind of an excuse to get together on a late Sunday morning, right? And, sometimes, too, it's just a matter of, sometimes getting together and meals are a little bit later on a Sunday morning because, you have things other than church, right? You might have other activities like sports or dance, right? Or you may just be busy, wanting to get the housework done before you go out and have a nice meal, right? Sometimes it's a matter of, you're able to get a few extra, minutes of sleep on a Sunday morning, right? And sometimes it's a matter of, you're going to cook all day, right? If you happen to be making brunch. And so, you're one of those people who likes to cook for the week on a Sunday. So if you're going to be having the whole kitchen looking like the morning of Thanksgiving anyway, you might as well, make some stuff for brunch too and eat up. But whatever the reason is, we get a glorious mashup of, breakfast and lunch, when we do think about brunch, and that's always a good thing. So I remember when I was a kid growing up in Brooklyn, right? We didn't go out for like, fancy brunch, right? I know, it was kind of a thing, right? It's become a lot more popular, I noticed, especially with the young people to get together with friends, and that type of thing. On a Sunday morning. But I remember the first time though as a kid I heard about brunch, and I thought it was great to have a breakfast item and a lunch item together, because I'm kind of a rule follower, except maybe in places like the kitchen, right, where I do like to experiment and mash things up. And I guess this is one of the early experiences that led me down that path. And so it was great. I could have a breakfast item and a lunch item. But it was interesting because my concept of brunch as a kid was, just taking a breakfast item and a lunch item and putting them together. So for me, I could make an Eggo waffle and have a slice of pizza at the same time. Or maybe I'd have my regular bowl of cereal that I'd have every morning before going to school, but I'd be able to slurp down half a soda with it, right? So now you'll have to understand too that as a kid, I was politely known as husky or big boned. Those were the type of terms that were polite for saying you are slightly overweight back in the day when I was a kid. So the idea of two meals in one was great for me to try. But I didn't actually get to see the formal brunch, right? The whole production that is known as brunch, right? Until one day my family went out for a brunch. I forget if it was Easter or Mother's Day, but it was one of those type of things in early spring. And we went out to Long Island to a place called the George Washington Manor. And there were, both some breakfast items and some lunch items. But there was like a synergy to the way the menu was put together, the types of foods that were available to you. Right. And there were things that you wouldn't expect to have, like things that I wasn't exposed to until I went to a place like this, because, they were brunch special type of things. So as an example, right, like steak and eggs. And I know some of the listeners out there might be like, oh, steak and eggs, I eat that because I need my protein, right? So that might be the reason why you do that. But for, somebody hustling, on an everyday basis, right, just running to work, maybe making a little breakfast, that type of thing, right? Normally you throw down like bacon or sausage if you're a meat eater, with the eggs. But steak and eggs is something like, that's a little more hearty, right? That's a little more, okay, this is a nice, lunch thing and a breakfast thing, right? Definitely a late Sunday morning thing to get me through the rest of the day. Also, for those of you who have heard of like Eggs Benedict, and now I know there's a whole bunch of versions of like Benedicts, and basically it's, half an English muffin at the bottom, and it usually involves a poached egg. For those of you who like the runny eggs, that's the way to go. For those, you can always ask for them to poach it hard, so this way your yolk doesn't run all over the place. But they do that, but the biggest thing is it's half an English muffin. There's an egg. Usually there's some kind of meat, like traditionally it's like a Canadian bacon, which is a ham, and then it's hollandaise sauce on the top. But normally you don't just go somewhere and say, hey, can I get an Eggs Benedict, right? Usually it's when you get something like that, it is on like a Sunday morning brunch. And especially too, because like the ingredients, if you actually do it the traditional way, it gets to be more complicated. And I'm not talking about toasting the half an English muffin, right? But like poaching the egg, right? If you're just doing this bootleg and you just want to fry an egg up real quick, you can do it. But if you're doing it the traditional way and you're poaching the egg and you want to make sure the yolk has enough run, but it's still thoroughly cooked, and then the hollandaise sauce is a whole nother thing, to be able to do it formally. So that's why those kind of dishes tend to be more of a special occasion Sunday brunch type of thing. Right. But again, though, too, when you think of brunch, right, I know other things that people are start trying to do now, because it is a little bit of a free for all, right? There are other things to consider. And one thing you definitely want to do is be creative, right? But you don't want to be, again, like maybe so creative, right? So that this way, like you take away from the whole meal. So as an example, right, you want to make a breakfast pizza. Okay, sounds great, right? So you go ahead, right? You could take your dough, maybe you use a little bit of a different dough, right? Because it's breakfasty, and you put breakfast toppings on it. You could put eggs and peppers and onions and sausage or whatever you want, and so now it looks like a pizza, right? Instead of having a slice of toast, you've got your pie crust, right? But you still have your traditional breakfast things. That's a breakfast pizza. right? That's kind of a brunch item that you put out there and people say, oh, that's kind of cool. Let me try that, right? What it's not is you go to the local pizza place and you buy like a regular pie, right, with the tomato sauce and the cheese at all, and then you throw an omelet on top of it, right? So there are things that, like, if you're thinking about presentation and taste and everything here, be creative, but don't be so out of the box that that it becomes something that doesn't make sense at all. There are other things too that I like to consider when I am talking about brunch, right? And because of the fact that it is, a mashup of things that you're taking one side and the other, I kind of like to have items that, bridge both breakfast and lunch, right? So like we talked about before, right? We talked about that breakfast pizza. We talked about steak and eggs, right? A big thing to have at a brunch is bacon. Right. And again, for those of you who, eat meat, right, or if you want the turkey bacon or if you want the, vegan bacon, whatever the story is, the idea is that you have both, you have a salty component here, right? And that goes well with some of the sweet stuff. So like, if you have bacon out as an example, right? Somebody wants to make a BLT with maybe some bread that you have out there, they can have a lunch. Somebody wants to go ahead and have it with the pancakes and the waffles you put out, they can have it as a breakfast. And so you get to have that combination of, maybe I want sweet and salty, maybe I just want lunch, that type of thing. And bacon, right, tends to be one of those kind of bridge, type of foods that you can put out there. For brunch too, again, it's an excuse to go ahead and try something traditional like a Benedict. Now, if I were doing a Benedict here for myself, right, what I'd probably do is I'd probably go buy a pack of English muffins, right, maybe cut one or two cut one in half, right, I get all the nooks and crannies, not to, steal a motto, put them in my toaster oven and be done. The poaching of the eggs, I don't know that I would take the time to poach the egg. I'd probably fry an egg up and I would throw it on top of my English muffin, right? Maybe I would get some, it'd be an excuse to get a Canadian bacon or, ham or that type of thing. If not, if it was bacon, if it was sausage, whatever it is, you could put that on top if you so choose to. I know other people might want to, use spinach here or something like that. And then the hollandaise sauce, listen, let's be realistic, right? You could sit there and you can do your hollandaise sauce, and if you have the time and the patience to do it so it doesn't break and all that, more power to you. Otherwise, you can go get a packet of hollandaise sauce, the dried packets that you kind of put water in, like some of the gravies. I'm not telling you it's the best, but I'm telling you it will do. So if you do want to try that for yourself. But if you are, entertaining, if you're having people over, that type of thing, or if you really, really, really want to have a Benedict and you don't want to go through all the trouble, go out for brunch. In that vein, another kind of traditional thing that you may want to consider for a brunch is a quiche. Right? And a quiche is kind of just like, like an egg tart, just a lot bigger. And traditionally, right, I know, like, if I'm not mistaken, right, like quiche Lorraine is basically, spinach and Swiss in with the egg. And it kind of looks like, like a custard pie, almost like if you bring it out, right? I know people like to do, maybe broccoli and cheese, like maybe like a broccoli and cheddar kind of quiche. And there's all kinds of other ones you can try. Again, this is where you have an excuse to, you want to make a meat lovers one, go for it, that type of thing. But again, you can always just pick one up too, at a local market that sells quiche, and it's a nice excuse to kind of have that because again, you're kind of serving that pie, but it's also still a breakfast item. So things like quiche and Benedicts and those type of things are kind of those like in between, special Sunday brunch type of things. But even if you don't want to do any of that stuff and you just want to use ingredients that you already have, right, you can go out there and let people make their own omelet or, and again, it's just a matter of doing a little prep. You can make the omelet for them, right? And again, you just dice up some ingredients, you put them out in little bowls, people see, ooh, and this is a nice excuse too. Like if you're the person who only buys the green peppers, right, because they're like, $1 cheaper per pound, right? Maybe you go ahead and you buy one red pepper, one yellow pepper, you dice it up and all of a sudden like, ooh, people, like, wow, you really went out of your way because you got 3 different color peppers, and it kind of makes the omelet like, jump a little bit more. So, but you could do that too. And again, that's a way of, people looking and seeing like, went out of your way to do something a little extra, or even for yourself too, right? This is the type of time to like maybe make the omelet with something that you wanted to try. If you are from the New York, New Jersey area, right, or if you happen to have a great local bagel store near you, where you are, which I'm sure they're using the water from this area, getting things like bagels and lox are great, because I know like if you go to a diner and you want to have like a bagel and lox, you could be spending above $10 for something like that. Whereas if you can go to the local bagel store and you just want to have that, bagels, cream cheese, lox, maybe slice some onion, that's a kind of a thing too that people like for like a late breakfast or an early lunch. Other things to consider, and maybe this is going above and beyond, but like if it's like a special occasion, like, a graduation brunch or a, holiday brunch or something like that, maybe now's the time to have a little seafood out there, right? I'm not telling you to go get king crab legs and lobster tails. If that's in your budget and you want to try it, more power to you. That same with prime rib, right? If you want to, do that and, you can do that with your means, that might be the time to break it out. If you've, gone out and, you have a little bit of truffle and, this is the time you're going to shave that little bit of truffle, over something like an omelet just to show that you've got it. And, this is how you're going to splurge, right? That's the time to do it. Okay. And again, too, you have all those type of things too. And then what you want to do is you also want to consider that there are going to be, if you do go out with a group or a group is coming over to you, or even if it's just a couple of friends, there are the people that are like, I can't start my day without my breakfast. Every day I have to have my breakfast. So you want to make sure you have a couple of ingredients out there that are maybe like they feel like they can just put together their breakfast, right? Whether it's a pancake, a waffle, eggs, whatever the story is, they can feel like they started with breakfast, and then your friend or family member who's like, listen, it's like 11:30, I'm ready for lunch. I don't care if I, because I already had breakfast before I came to your house, so I want to have lunch. Again, maybe you have a couple of things there. And that's where having those bridge items is kind of nice too, like the bacon or like certain breads or that type of thing, because it allows you, to satisfy both sets of people. The final thing I'll leave you with on this too is that it's a nice excuse to be able to have a little dessert out as well. Because yes, you're going to have the people who go for a waffle, who go for pancakes, who do that kind of stuff, and they get their sweet that way. But there are other people who are going to do the savory thing, whether it is on breakfast or lunch. And it's nice to be able to put out maybe a little fresh fruit, or if it's like a small pie or something like that. And it allows you to kind of bring the seasons in. So this way, whether it's a, kind of like a peach pie in like the, the spring, summer, that type of thing, or whether it's more of a pumpkin pie, nothing like so heavy, because again, it's going to be the last thing that they're eating after the brunch. So you don't want to make it so overpowering that, they're waddling out as if it is the day after Thanksgiving, the night of Thanksgiving. So, you can have that as well. And it's a nice way to finish off the meal. It's a nice way, like if you want people to be able to stay a little longer just to kind of chew the fat with you, have some coffee, have some tea, that type of thing. It's a nice excuse to be able to put out a little dessert as well. So once you've done all that prep, once you've thought it through, right, once you've gotten in the car and driven somewhere else because all this stuff we talked about is just too much and you just want to be able to go eat brunch and enjoy it without cooking anything like this, that's all good. But since this is a Stories and Recipes episode, right, I want to make sure that, you've A, enjoyed the episode, but B, I want to reiterate the words of my dad when it comes to cooking and eating. And before you have the meal, make sure you say, God bless America, let's eat. So thank you as always for your time today. I hope you've enjoyed this episode in discussing brunch, a little bit about its roots, a little more about ways that you can do brunch, enjoy brunch, different ways you can think about brunch. Again, it's a great meal. It's a great excuse to have a brunch. Don't feel like you got to wait for the special occasion to do it. Go ahead and treat yourself to brunch one day. To go ahead and get out there and experiment with this, or just, take yourself out to lunch, even if nobody else is around, and go have a good time with that. So, again, this show runs best with all of your feedback, so I'm always appreciative of the feedback that we get for the show. You can contact me at skicaphoodieandshorts@gmail.com. You can go to our website, which has all the episodes listed as well as some other content at www.skicaphoodieandshorts.com. If you want to go to my main website that I use for some educational items and some great projects I'm working with some great people around the globe in education, you can go to www.ourtechcoach.com. And if you are looking for me on social media, if you want to DM me on Twitter or hit me up on Twitter, it is @OurTechCoach, which is all one word, and it is my main Twitter handle. So as always, again, thank you very much for your time today. I really appreciate you guys out there, and thank you for listening to the Ski Cap Hoodie and Shorts podcast. And please remember to be good to yourself and be yourself.